Thanks for downloading this episode of the Mental Health Book Club podcast. Did you know that you can now support us through Patreon by donating as little as $2 a month to the running of the Mental Health Book Club podcast? Please head over to Patreon, which is patreon.com/MHBC, and consider donating as little as $2 a month to the podcast to help with running costs, and eventually, hopefully, fingers crossed, we will be able to start donating some of that money to charities such as Mind, as well as various other charities associated with mental health, but only as we reach our goals of, our first goal is $200, our next goal is $400, and so on. So it would be fantastic if we could get to that point. We have changed the tiers for support slightly. So if you are going to become a patron, if you go in at the silver level, you now get a tote bag, and that is the one that says it's okay not to be okay. So if you are willing to become a gold member or the gold tier of the Patreon page, then you will be eligible to receive a free mug. There are 2 types of mug. I haven't decided which one I am going to routinely send out, but if there's any preference, just let me know. I'm more than happy to send you which one you prefer. And if you haven't done so already, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media platforms. You can now find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. All the links can be found in the show notes. Hello and welcome to the Mental Health Book Club podcast with your hosts Sydney Timmins and Becky Lawrence. We would like to take this opportunity to let you know that we will be covering a diverse range of mental health topics that may be distressing to some listeners. You can find a full list of the topics being covered in each episode in the show notes. Please check the show notes before listening to any of our episodes. Welcome to the Mental Health Book Club podcast with me, Sydney Timmins. This episode is going to be slightly different to ones that we have done in the past because I am going to record my initial impressions of the mental health first aid course that I'm currently undertaking. So this is night 1 of the course. It's a 2-day course, and I am currently doing my homework from the course, which is the happy hour. So I have taken a bath. I am currently sat here in my Wonder Woman pyjamas, much to Lawrence's disgust because they leave glitter everywhere, so he's going to now be covered in gold glitter for tomorrow at work. I also think that the dogs are pretty annoyed by the fact that I'm wearing my Wonder Woman pyjamas because they also get covered in gold glitter. And I do think that the big black dog is very happy by the fact that I've been given this homework because he's taking full advantage of it by sleeping on the bed and getting lots of attention as part of that happy hour. I will do another podcast episode with Becky and we'll probably discuss mental health first aid in adults and mental health first aid with young people and just do a comparison of the 2 courses. I am extremely lucky to have been funded in part by Happy Fall magazine, so I'd like to give a big shout out to Happy Fall magazine. They are a monthly publication in which they produce the magazine and they have a particular mission, and their mission is to create a healthier, happy and more sustainable society. Their aim is to provide informative, inspiring and topical stories about mental health and well-being, and they want to help break the stigma of mental health in society and to shine a light on positivity and support that should be available for everyone no matter their situation. And you can find out more information about them at happyfall.com. I am looking at ways to provide additional benefits to you guys. So, for example, I have started a blog. So on sydneytimmins.com, you can now find my opinions about certain topics associated with mental health. My next blog post is going to be around how you talk about suicide with other people. So if you are concerned that someone may be feeling suicidal, what things can you say? Because it is such a difficult topic. It is worrying. It can be anxiety inducing for people. What is it that you can do / say to try and support someone who may be going through a mental health crisis? And so watch this space. Whilst we are very grateful for the 2 patrons that we currently have for the podcast, It doesn't mean that if you are unable to support with a monetary donation, that there isn't other ways that you can help us. So if you haven't already, please share us with your family and friends. Head over to social media and like us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All of those links should be in the show notes. And we would really love to know what you think about the podcast. Are we actually doing something that you find beneficial? Are you liking the topics? Anything like that, get in contact with us. Also, if you wouldn't mind to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast, because that really helps people be able to find us. So let's get stuck straight into my initial thoughts of the mental health first aid course that I'm undertaking. So I have to admit I was extremely anxious before I went, and because of that, it meant that I left my house over an hour early to ensure that I'd be there on time because I was getting myself stressed. And instead of just sitting outside in my car, I did go to Starbucks, get myself a cup of tea and tried to relax before going in. And regardless of my anxiety, I still went in, and when everyone went around the room, I thought I might as well just put it all out there on the table. And I don't know, I kind of did this kind of dump of information of, this is almost my entire mental health history. I'm afraid I've been there. I've gotten the t-shirt for quite a lot of things. So I thought it was important to be upfront straight away, because then if I was triggered by any of the topics that we were discussing, if people also had questions, because it turns out that other people in the group hadn't necessarily had the same experiences that I have had, that they could ask questions. I mean, what I said, I haven't necessarily kept to myself. So I told you guys on the podcast that I have attempted suicide in the past, that I have self-harmed, that I have abused alcohol and over-the-counter medication such as codeine, and all of the kind of, I don't know, things that I think most people would be overwhelmed by. And I was worried that I was going to overwhelm the group by going, hi guys, I've got all of this stuff. But in some ways, the whole point of this course is that you're sat in a group of people that are probably more aware about mental health than the majority of the population. Because this course wasn't something that was being undertaken in the workplace. People have had to sign up to the course. I thought, well, I might as well just be open and honest and say it all. And I have to say that this is probably one of the first times that I've felt so accepted by a group outside of maybe the DBT group sessions that I did, because obviously everyone was there going through dialectical behaviour therapy because of their borderline personality disorder. I didn't feel judged, which is probably one of the most difficult things to feel as someone with a mental health condition. And I am now kind of worried in some respects that because I did just kind of verbally throw it all out, that I'm now monopolising the discussion a little bit, purely because I feel like I've been there and I've done that. So I'm pretty conscious of that, and I don't want to take it away from others learning things in the group, if that makes sense. And I don't know if that is purely from my own anxieties, or I don't know, it's difficult to describe, and I'm wondering if maybe it's in my head that I'm overthinking the situation, which is a possibility with me. But I'm really hoping that by sharing my own personal experiences, I'm helping others be able to understand that these are the thoughts and feelings that were going through my head when I was in depression, and also when I was feeling suicidal. So today, the discussion has been about depression and suicide. So it's been a very heavy day, and it was made extremely clear from the beginning that if at any point anyone felt uncomfortable or it was getting too much, you could leave and come back to the group once you have cleared your head a bit. And I think that in itself was an extremely positive thing to have been told, because sometimes you do feel that if you are getting overwhelmed, you can't necessarily say that you are. I don't know if that's a BPD trait or if that is a trait that other people experience. I mean, sometimes I find it very difficult to distinguish one from the other. So some of the things that we did today, so obviously you get the course introduction and you do the kind of group agreement about confidentiality and respecting each other and all of those kind of things, which is probably the bread and butter of most commercial courses out there, which is fantastic because I do think that's important, that even though we are all adults, that ground rules are set at the very beginning, because then you know where you stand with each other. And I personally had concerns about sometimes when I'm talking about my own mental health, I can make it a little flippant, and people can find that in itself a little jarring, I think, because when you do talk about things such as mental health, it is quite a serious topic. But I wouldn't survive if I was always serious 100% of the time. And just because I've had personal experience doesn't mean that I have the right to do that and talk about these things in a way that may come across as disrespectful or is inappropriate to say out loud. And I'm always very conscious of that. And I did start off by saying, look, if that happens, I apologise now, kind of apologising up front, which is another thing I seem to tend to do. But I do also think that that might be a typical British thing, is to just go, look, everyone, I apologise for anything I do right now. And yeah, people did kind of chuckle at me, but they were like, you know what, we're all adults. And if we trip up, you got to remember that everyone's human, which is fair enough. There's times when I trip up on things and say the wrong thing, particularly on the podcast, and I've gone back and re-recorded words that I'm not happy about and the way that I've said something. But I just found it really interesting that I had this need to apologise just in case. If anyone can tell me why I may do that, please let me know. Answers on a postcard. The great thing about this course is that there is also a lot of group activities. So it's not just you sat there listening to someone talk at you about mental health first aid. It's also the ability to be able to share things with each other and listen to other people's experiences about mental health. There was quite a lot of discussion, which I found absolutely fascinating. And we probably could have been there all day talking about. I know that when we got into some of the things that we were like, that's really interesting. So there was discussions about issues with funding and getting the support that you need from professional help, and the fact that there is issues with services that are available to people, and the need that some people have decided to go private now because they're unable to access what they need when they need it. One activity that I thought was really interesting was this kind of acceptable graffiti and unacceptable graffiti. And what that was when you think about talking about mental health, there are things that are acceptable and things that are unacceptable to say. And when you did that exercise, you went, oh, okay, I can do this. It sounds pretty easy to do. But when you get down to it, finding words that you think are acceptable to describe mental health was really difficult in comparison to the things that are unacceptable. So, for example, the things that we come up with under the unacceptable category were things such as maniac, nuts, crazy, Fruit Loop, schizo, mental, round the bend, bonkers, and so much more. I mean, the list continued for quite some time. I can't remember them all off the top of my head right now, but the list just kept going and going. In comparison to the list where we tried to identify words that would be acceptable to use when talking about mental health, I mean, we had so much issues. We came up with things like maintaining mental health and recovery and self-care and therapy and acceptance and those kind of words. But it's interesting as society how we have developed so many words associated with the negative connotations with mental health in comparison to the words that we go, well, I think that's an acceptable word to use for mental health. Equally, there was discussions about whether the use of the term mental health in itself was causing stigma because of the way that we perceive the word mental. I mean, at school, we would have used "you're so mental" when someone was different or someone was unique, and we would use it in a derogatory way. So therefore, when you think about mental health And if, for example, you were to ask someone who wasn't in the mental health world, do you have mental health? They would be like, no, I'm not mental. What are you talking about? And you're like, no, that's not what is being said or implied. I mean, we all have physical health, therefore we all have mental health. But when people hear that word mental, they instantly will go to the negative. And what word could you use instead of mental? And we discussed this, and it was really interesting what people suggested. And one of the things that was suggested was brain health. And then you think about brain health, that is implying also the physical structure of the brain. And so is that really getting across what mental health is? Someone else suggested that maybe instead of brain health or mental health, you had mind health, because that kind of pulls you away from the structural aspect of the brain. And you could suggest emotional health, but again, that is maybe defining it too narrowly, because really it's, when you talk about mind, it's about the things that are more hidden. So the thoughts, the feelings, the processes that are going on in the brain, the thought processes really, in comparison to another type of word that could use to describe mental health. As someone who is doing work in the mental health arena, I do feel like I am in this kind of bubble associated with it. So instead of looking at maybe the wider community and understanding that people are still unsure about what mental health is, they're still unsure about different conditions, they're still unsure about how to speak to someone about their mental health, which is why Mental Health First Aid England is trying to train a lot of people in this. So they want to eventually train 1 in 10 people, which I think is a fantastic idea. I think it's a big goal to have, because over the last 10 years, only 250,000 people have been trained. There's still quite a way to go. You are trying to get mental health on the same scale and on the same kind of level as physical health. And it was just really interesting because, again, the people in the room were people that were highly motivated in the mental health field as such, because people were there from respective companies specifically looking for the mental health first aid side of things. And so we discussed depression up until lunchtime. We then had our break, and then we came back to tackle the equally difficult topic of suicide. And once again, speaking to the group, I think I was the only one in that group that may have had attempted suicide. I wouldn't want to say whether anyone had had suicidal ideation, so suicidal thoughts. There is that possibility. But I think I was the only one in the room that had attempted suicide in the first place. And it was really interesting because of some of the preconceived ideas that others had. So, for example, we were shown this video of a woman probably in her 60s who had suffered with depression and had decided to take her own life. And she was not the stereotypical person that you would associate suicide with. And it was really interesting to listen to the discussion around the room about what a person who has attempted suicide would look like and what would be the characteristics. I mean, I didn't divulge to the group that I have a PhD because, I don't know, is there going to be this judgment? And I know that we talked about being non-judgmental and non-judgmental listening, but there is still in the back of your head that if you turn around and said, well, I have a PhD, could I be seen as bragging about it? And I always worry about that and go, oh yeah, by the way, I have a PhD and I'm a doctor. It's just, I don't know, one of those things that I don't think I routinely talk about. So also during today, we were introduced to the acronym, which all mental health first aiders are taught because it is a nice, easy way to be able to remember kind of like the steps that you would employ if you were talking to someone about their mental health. And that acronym is ALGEE, which is ALGEE. And I got it stuck in my head that it's algae, like ALGAE. And I did go, did anyone ever consider that that sounds like something that could potentially add to the stigma associated with mental health? Because it doesn't sound nice. You're like, algae sounds like, obviously, algae, and that's that green, slimy, nasty stuff that you find at the beach and on rocks and things. And you're like, I wonder if anyone really thought about the kind of associations that some people might have with that particular plant substance. And also the fact that the mental health first aid colours is green. And so algae was written in green on some of the material that we were given. It just, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I was just like, oh, I'm not sure about the acronym. But anyway, what does that acronym stand for? And I think this is really interesting because you kind of go, well, there's an A, there's an L, there's a G, and there's two E's. You're like, excellent, one word for each. No. I felt like I was catapulted back into my DBT days trying to remember these acronyms. And so A stands for approach, assess, and assist. L stands for listening, so non-judgmental listening. G stands for give support and give information. So that is obviously give them information about potential areas that they can get help from. E is to encourage the individual to seek professional help. And then the other E is to give information about other support, so encourage other support routes such as charities. So I now have this handy little card that I can pop out, and it's one of those foldable plasticky papery cards that you then have to do some origami to get it folded back up to get it back into the plastic wallet. But it's really quite nice because it's something tangible that you can take away. It's small enough that it can go into your handbag, into your wallet. You can carry it around with you and you can use it as a point of reference. I thought that was really good. The other thing that I thought was fantastic was the additional material that you get handed whilst doing the course. So you end up with this really nice chunky book that has everything that's covered in the course in, and you also get a separate activity book. And so in that activity book, we went through things such as the stress container and about then coping mechanisms of being able to help empty that container, which is a really interesting concept. And I know that this is also discussed in the young adult mental health first aid course. So I will go into much more detail about this when I discuss it with Becky. But I did discover that I thought my stress container was quite small and that I tend to, maybe, I don't know, I shouldn't stigmatize myself by saying, well, I overreact to something, but I do find it quite difficult and I have to employ a lot of coping skills to be able to maintain my emotional well-being. So maybe if I could figure out ways of better, emptying my stress container, it would make my life a lot happier, just generally. And that I found also extremely interesting. So all in all, the first day really has been fantastic. I really enjoyed it. In some ways, it's kind of inspired me as to whether I would contemplate becoming a mental health first aid trainer. Unfortunately, at the moment, I don't have the funds to be able to do that, but maybe one day in the future, if the podcast takes off and we get more support and we sell some merchandise and all of those kind of things. And I'm really looking forward to day 2. So this is just my initial thoughts and feelings. It's kind of like a bit of a brain dump. So this is kind of like a voice journal of the first day of the mental health first aid course. I really think that it was enlightening. I did learn things about the way that others around me see things, because I think that's probably one of the most difficult things is how do others perceive people with mental health? And these people in the group were so supportive, and I don't know, I felt like they were listening to me, and I think that is probably I don't think I've ever felt that before. I don't think I've ever felt like people really accepted me for being me. So, I would just like to say that algae is not the green stuff that you may find at the seaside or on damp surfaces. It is the acronym that helps you to be a mental health first aider. So in the meantime, it's okay not to be okay. And if you're not okay, talk. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Mental Health Book Club podcast. If you need additional help with your mental health, please contact the Samaritans on 116 123, which is a 24-hour helpline. And if you need additional information about mental health issues, please visit Mind at mind.org.uk. Our next episode will be our discussion of Love and Remission by Annie Belasco. Our next episode with the Secret Psychiatrist will be about physical illness and mental health. If you'd like to find out more about the MHBC podcast, please visit our website, mentalhealthbookclub.com. We really hope that you enjoy this podcast, and we would like to hear what you think. Please head over to Twitter and follow us at MHBC_podcast, or head over to Facebook and follow our Facebook page, which is Mental Health Book Club. If you would like to show your support further, please share us with your family and friends, and leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. You can now support the Mental Health Book Club podcast on Patreon by going to patreon.com/MHBC. For as little as $2 a month, you will be able to get early access to our episodes. You'll be able to get our full episodes, so usually I split them into 30-minute episodes. You can get all of the episode in one go, and you will also be eligible for free prize draws and other giveaways as we go through. If you choose to support us on the silver level or gold level, you will now get a Mental Health Book Club podcast tote bag which says it's okay not to be okay. And when we meet our target of $200 per month, we will be then giving $50 to Mind, the mental health charity. We would absolutely love to be able to get to this position because we want to be able to give back to the mental health community as much as you guys help us out.